Welcome to the Blockbusters and Birdwalks podcast. I am the curator, Garrett Chaffin-Quiray. Today we have a conversation with a friend, Ed Rosa.
That's me. Hi. My filmmaking partner and I have a YouTube channel, Toothless Richard Productions, where you can see a number of our short films.
When I began publishing Blockbusters and Birdwalks, it was a hosting site for essays and thoughts that I had, and that branched off into making podcasts. Then we agreed to do a partnership, and separately I have another partnership with a friend, Richard Ryan, making the High Low Bro Show. One thing that Richard said to me in our last recording concerning the Big Dollhouse is the following.
I think that 1971 is in many ways a crux point when American counterculture, and specifically the anti-Vietnam War movement, has begun to get a little sour.
As always happens, the counterculture has sort of become the culture, and there's a lot on society's plate. This guy, this businessman, disappears. One of his business partners hires Klute to try to find out what happened to this guy. His investigation leads him to be introduced to Bree Daniels, the prostitute, played by Jane Fonda, and a bit of a romance develops between the two of them. That's basically it.
They figure out what happened, and they sort of they make a push towards trying to be some kind of romantic couple with some kind of a happy ending, but a huge glimmer of it may not work out. And of course, Klute is played by Donald Sutherland, and it's fun to see him as a young guy. One thing that I've always thought about Jane Fonda is that she's never been quite my version of what female beauty is, although I recognize that she's athletic and trim and all that stuff, until there are moments when she breaks down.
Yeah.
In this movie, she does have people at her remove because it's a professional requirement of a prostitute.
Right.
I am always reeling men in by their Johnson.
Right.
And I've got to keep them on that hook by giving them everything they think they're getting, but it's none of it legitimate. And we can tell that it's put on. But there are moments when she does break down a little bit, and in this movie, Klute, I'm thinking of two. There comes a spot when Klute definitely has developed romantic feelings, and she has seduced him, so they've had the Congress. Mm-hmm. It's happened. And there's a tumult while he's trying to help her sort out who the killer actually is in the background, and she assaults him.
Right.
And he's sort of disgusted and confused by this and leaves her for personal safety and to regroup a little bit. And you watch her face crumble. So it's without dialogue. We can watch this very verbose, very smart actress instead emote just with her big eyes. And it's quite marvelous.
Yeah.
It got past that iciness that I normally think of as being a Jane Fonda thing.
Yeah, actually, it's funny because I felt like she stabbed me too at that part. I'm pretty stupid about a lot of stuff, and so I wasn't quite sure what her motivation was other than Klute has just tried to whip her pimp's ass.
Right.
And she becomes upset by this, and then so she attacks him. And I was like, wait, okay, so you're more into the pimp than him?
Yeah.
Because it
is Roy Scheider, so I understand why you would be attracted
absolutely.
to him.
But I think we probably agree on the other one that you're gonna mention.
It's the penultimate sequence when he has figured out that the man who hired him to perform this investigation is in fact the killer. Mm-hmm. He realizes that, and in the pre-internet age with no cell phones, he has to literally race across town to where he knows she is.
Right.
Because Bree is being confronted by this guy, and Klute knows it. So it results in this confrontation. While that's building, the killer, he's playing back to her a recording of the dead man's conversation with her, where she's explaining to this excuse for the whole narrative, the kinds of fun sex play they're going to have. And she begins to cry, snot dribbling out of her nose.
Yeah.
She crumbles. Again, it's wordless in the scene, although it's playback of SOT.
The tape is it's like a snuff reel. It's when he killed that other girl.
That's right.
And she's screaming while she's being murdered. And
and we watch realize that's what's for me.
And and the tears start coming. And,
I'm getting things out of order. You're right. Now, I found those moments critical to sort of getting beyond what I consider the typically very polished professional mien of Jane Fonda's roles throughout her career. But she's so boxed out of her own honest feeling. And in fact, that becomes one of the structuring motifs of Klute that proves interesting among various interesting components. Very often, we're listening to conversations that Bree is having with her shrink.
What's the difference between going out on a call as a model or as an actress, as a call girl? You're successful as a call girl. You're not
Because
successful.
when you're a call girl, you control it. That's why. Because someone wants you. Not me. I mean, there are some Johns that I have regularly that want me, and that's terrific. But they want a woman. And I know I'm good. And I arrive at their hotel or their apartment. And they're usually nervous, which is fine because I'm not. I know what I'm doing. And for an hour, I'm the best actress in the world and the best fuck in the world.
There comes a point after she's begun making love with Klute. She explains, I'm coming back into my body. I feel good. The things that we might say are kind of a puppy love feature.
Yeah. There's a moment, they're like buying groceries or something, and they're at some market.
Oh, yeah.
And she's kind of standing behind him. And there's this moment where she kind of like puts her head like on his, like the back of like his shoulder or something.
Yeah.
You can just tell in her face, it's like something that she's not used to doing or very comfortable with doing, because it's not something she would ever really do with one of like her clients unless it was something they were paying for. And then when they go to leave, she just kind of like just grabs a hold of the back of his shirt a little bit and like hangs onto it
Like baby elephant.
and I was like, that is so sweet.
Yeah,
Like,
and
that is
the whole scene, as I
adorable.
recall it, is a photograph from probably across the street. We should, of course, mention Gordon Willis is the cinematographer for this thing. It's exquisite. The layers of darkness and light and the patterns that generates. And that means also that there's not really dialogue. It's just a crowd scene of people buying their pineapple, getting their cantaloupe.
Right.
We hear these muttered words.
Because she is so guarded, part of the reason that she is a prostitute, this way she can still have connections with men, but not have to actually deal with those real feelings that are the kind of feelings that you can't control.
There is a sequence when we're briefly with the killer, who's this wealthy Pennsylvania businessman, as he takes off from a helipad somewhere in Lower Manhattan, and we get a sky shot of Lower Manhattan.
That's an incredible shot. Oh, the one of him in the helicopter.
Pre-World Trade Center.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So that brings to mind that we haven't even got to the argument about what an ugly edifice it was versus where we are now. That very particularly places us exactly in this spot in time, where I know from other experiences and having lived in the city, that was a moment when New York City was beginning to have an economic collapse. There are scenes where she's on Park Avenue, she's on Madison Avenue, the named places that we all think of as being the city.
Right.
And it's kind of glorious and kind of terrific. But she lives above a funeral parlor in a studio apartment that's quite big from one way of thinking.
Right.
And it's lived in. She's got lots of personal effects. But it's above a funeral parlor. It's a bad part of town.
Right.
Because she's been busted and lost her Park Avenue address and her good income. Partly to avoid becoming a heroin addict, which seems to be the lot of a lot of other prostitutes like her. What I'm saying is that while we get the avenues that are famous world over, we also get the streets and the side streets where things are just filled with crud.
Yeah.
There's a lot of trash,
Yeah.
which is a sign of how the city was in its collapse from the late 60s into the 1970s.
Yeah, because this is before Disney bought Times
Oh,
Square.
this is a generation before
when
that.
was it, 42nd Street or whatever?
Yeah.
Had all like the porno theaters.
Yeah, well,
and,
that would have still been definitely in effect at this
Yeah.
moment. If you should ever see the HBO series The Deuce, its first season happens about a year or two after this movie is expressed. So it's deeply seedy, deeply drug-ridden around the edges of the center points of town. And I mean to emphasize that doubly so because this is pre-AIDS. We're not concerned about HIV and sex transmission except for old-fashioned things like the clap and gonorrhea, which we learned all about in Mom and Dad.
Yeah, oh, too much.
Its language and its exposure to the underbelly of polite society, I don't feel is that shocking anymore, but I can sort of put my history goggles on. And one is that example of its pre-HIV AIDS. But we are restricting our point of view to the life of a prostitute, played by a world-famous, world-class beauty called Jane Fonda from literal Hollywood royalty, who is trained in her personal life to the limits of what her family wealth could produce in her. So her elocution is marvelous, her skin is perfect, she's well coiffed. All of that adds up to a very peculiar slice of sex worker trade. Now that we're more than 50 years later, I have definitely gone out of my way to find TV shows, movies, novels, and histories that think about that line of work with a different frame of reference, a different frame of reality. But you pile on top of that a couple of things that are curious about the 1970s. I kept thinking as the movie was finishing that there were certain images I was looking at, and they're surveillance images. It's this weird killer guy, this businessman from Pennsylvania, who's effectively watching and hunting Bree. He's doing so from outside of her home, through a rooftop plate glass window that looks down into her studio, through fences. In other words, he's setting up Halloween. He's setting up Friday the 13th. He's setting up the slasher killer.
Totally, yeah. John Carpenter and Halloween totally
takes this and runs with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And embodies it with monstrosity rather than the hidden monster of a very polished businessman with a kink who knows it's shameful and embarrassing, who's well-spoken. And that's just Hannibal Lecter, who Thomas Harris would write about with Red Dragon and then the series of movies that would turn into Silence of the Lambs by the early 1990s. I guess what I'm seeing then is, though this movie is meant for adults, it's adult in content, there's lots of profanity, there are fairly blunt descriptions of sex acts because, after all, she's trying to gin up trade. There is a description of that trade. For example, when Klute gets into town and he greets the investigators who were stymied on finding the man who's disappeared, and they presume he's dead. One of them explains that a good pro, like presumably Bree is going to turn 600 to 700 tricks in a year.
Yeah.
And like the next scene, she's on the phone calling somebody who's effectively a pimp, saying, "I need some lunch trade. I need a quick 50." So you multiply that out. That's a person who's maybe going to earn somewhere between $30,000 and $80,000 in 1971 money.
That's big money.
Which is big money when you adjust it for inflation. So it's real, the trade in flesh. And the flesh pot at the center of it is an exceptional beauty because she's characterized in one very specific and interesting way. And that is, she's a wannabe model and an actress who makes ends meet, not by waiting tables, which is another line of service work a lot of performers go into, but she sells her body. And we see this really, really demeaning scene where she's lined up with another 12 gorgeous women of similar type. Tall, thin brunettes who are being judged by magazine editors for the look of their teeth, the spread of their eyes, whether they got too many freckles, their hairstyle's not quite right, or what have you. It's just a complete meat market. She doesn't get the job, and then she goes and has a fling with a John.
Right.
This idea of making show business the thing that you have to support through non-show business, which is still an act, I don't think is new to this movie or this time.
No.
But the way that it is expressed is pretty on the nose.
Yeah. If you look at it through a certain lens, it's almost kind of about like Hollywood.
Yeah.
In a way. Like, we got this murder, mystery, missing persons, romance thing going
That's
on.
the excuse to tell a story. We've got to find people.
But, like the subtext, like you could say, and no surprise that it would be so well received if that's the case, because Hollywood loves nothing more than movies about Hollywood.
And in this stage of Jane Fonda's life, she had become basically a kind of a sex icon. And so she literalizes that by playing a sex icon, a prostitute, who actually wants to go into the mainstream as a fashion model, as an actress. And we watch her perform a monologue in the way the scene is set up. Presumably it's an audition, and this is her first read. And she's doing the job. She's delivering a good performance. But in the same way, the people who are judging the effectiveness of her performance don't seem very moved.
Well, I think part of that is because she's doing an Irish accent, but she's supposed to be Joan of Arc.
Oh, I missed that detail. Is that the scene?
Yeah.
Oh, because she is doing an effective Irish accent.
Yeah.
Oh, this is curious.
Yeah, right.
Oh, okay.
But she's supposed to, because I think the director says, like, interesting accent or something, or whoever's conducting the audition.
Right.
Says that.
And the camera pulls away from her, and we again watch the meat market.
Yeah.
Whereas she works as a call girl, and the danger there is being beat up, and she is, not in the present action, but that's part of what puts her in connection with this crime. Now, just placing this like on the table, I made some students watch The Godfather recently, and only a few of them picked up on the fact that one of the things that makes the Don stay away from heroin and narcotics is partly the incredible addiction and the quality of degradation that's attached to that. not just self-humiliation because you become a junkie, but you actually hollow your life and everybody around you because you'll steal anything to get
Right.
drugs. And he associates that with black people. That's definitely how this movie seems to be building itself, too. There are licit and illicit drugs. You can have liquor, and that's fine. You can maybe smoke a doobie behind closed doors in your home, and that's not fine. It's illegal, but that's kind of part of the culture. But then there's the hard stuff on the street.
Right.
And some of the women that Bree is helpful in helping the investigation move towards are other call girls who've fallen out because they've become addicted to really intense stuff. They're beaten up and they're really poor.
There's that scene where she and Klute go to the apartment of one of the other call girls that she knows, and they're waiting for their dealer to show up, and she's like, please get out of here. Like, if he sees you, like, he's going to take off. Of course, they don't leave. He comes to the door, sees them, and bolts. And then I just felt terrible for the two junkies because, like, they really are sick.
The fact of making Jane Fonda into our point of view character is fine as far as it goes, but it does eclipse maybe a truer representation of what that world is all about. Now, I'm not going to hold this movie up to realism. That's not its point. Although I think there's a lot of realism attached to it.
Yeah, I agree.
Design elements, costume elements, how it moves through the city, what the city looks like, the people in the background. There is one really specific physical cue that really got my attention. So she's in a studio apartment. It's a nicely arranged, homey kind of a place. I kind of liked her home. And we hear outside the windows the sound of children playing. I found those little sonic details, they sold me. Because I thought, she's attached to people, but she's got her four-wall removed, and there are windows where the icky guy is surveilling her from a distance. But she's got her privacy to a degree. She's got her comfort to a degree. She's got self-sufficiency to a degree. And there are people around her. How do I know? Because I can hear them.
They actually, according to IMDb trivia, she lived in that space because she was like so into the role. She wanted to just get into the character so much. She wanted to be in that space, and she decorated the place. It was her idea to have the cat. That naturalistic way that she comes across when she's at home, that's because she was actually living there.
Yeah, okay.
Which is
And to express the geography of that small studio, when I say small studio, I'm going to guess that the place is supposed to be 500 or 600 square feet, something like that. One large room with a kitchenette and a bathroom off the side. It's got kind of a Juliet balcony kind of a thing with these plate glass windows looking out into the world. So in one respect, it's a lot like Jimmy Stewart's place in Rear Window.
Which is so funny because there's a shot in it where you're looking between two buildings and another, and it's like a red building, and I'm like, that looks exactly like the Rear Window poster.
It could be. It could be an homage to that earlier piece. It's also about a solitary figure stuck in New York who's
voyeurism.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's baked into how all of this works. We get glimpses of Jane's body, disrobing for John's or trying to seduce Klute, and wow, I wasn't expecting that. But a lot of the movie is about a stationary camera or a stationary camera on a very small, slow-moving track. But we watch things.
Right.
A lot of the movie is based on watching.
Yeah, we just sit, totally. Well, you were mentioning, when she's at home, she's got her mega pint of wine.
Yeah.
And she's got, a little doob on her roach clips, and she's, like, reading a book or whatever. And, like, we just sit with that for a little bit.
Right.
We don't... Because, like, one of the ideas is, like, right, if it doesn't advance the story, like, cut it, right?
Yeah.
And there's so many movies that I see where there's so much kind of, like meat that could be easily, or, like, fat that could be trimmed off.
Yeah.
It's important that we just sit and watch, because so much of what's going on in the story is about sitting and watching, particularly if that Hollywood subtext is applicable.
Right.
It's all
and
about
it
sitting
definitely
and
is, because we're watching the superstar behave as an actress, behaving as a person. We're well aware of it, but because of the extended sequences of that, the layers of artifice drift away, and what we're actually watching is Bree. I know for the longest time I always thought Klute was her name. In the years of misprinting this in my memory, so to discover that it's his name, and that very little time is spent with him in these contemplative strategies of rest and observation is the point. Klute he is himself a red herring instead of a story about a red herring, so we can do a lengthy character study of a woman caught in a trap, but she's not quite without agency exactly, because she's a sex worker who knows how to lead men along.
Yeah.
The weird thing, because this movie is also kind of typical at this moment, that it doesn't close off every narrative angle.
Right.
When Klute shows up and foils the bad guy, there's not a shoot 'em up. The dude just commits suicide by hopping out a window.
Right.
And when we watch Klute picking Bree up at her now empty studio apartment to leave, presumably for wherever he lives in Pennsylvania, and go back to his life and escape the city, which is coded as, the sewer, the place of ill repute, the place of temptation, the place of wealth, yes, but danger. She gets a final call from some former John, and she has to explain, well, I'm leaving town. I may not come back. And that's juxtaposed with her last session with her therapist, where she says, but maybe I'll see you next week.
Right, yeah. Which I couldn't handle that domestic life.
Yeah. What's going to be in it for me when I get somewhere where I can't just leave men around to earn money?
Which is funny, because the movie did, at its conclusion, it did leave me thinking about that. Because in the moment, it seems, at the very conclusion of the film, it seems as if she's sort of given in to these kind of, this genuine affection she seems to have developed for him and is willing to give it a try. But, she freely admits that there are aspects of her job as a call girl that she likes.
Yeah.
And that she, in fact, likes them so much that she can't stop doing it. So now what is she doing? Is she going to Pennsylvania to now, play the role of, housewife
to the ultimate John service.
And how long is that going to last before she's like, it's time for this series to be canceled. I'm out.
It would be fun because Donald Sutherland and Jane Fonda are both with us to have Klute too.
Toot.
She's
Klute, you can style KLU2E on the poster.
I want to just focus on one additional movie. This opens June 1971. The next month, we get Shaft.
Ah, yes.
And in some meta level, these two movies are twins to me. Because Klute is the takedown of Hollywood royalty through Hollywood royal's child turning dirty and playing a prostitute, but still doing it winningly and getting the top award. Whereas Shaft literally brown washes the whole tradition of noir detective thrillers and places at its center a very appealing and charismatic performer, Richard Roundtree, running one up on the man. Both of those movies are terrifically meta in thinking about the tradition of storytelling. And both of them are New York stories in Lower Manhattan. Both of them are made at roughly the same moment. Both of them are about the sort of seedy underworld that most of us sort of avoid because our lifestyles don't go into that area.
Right.
Or that we are shepherded and shielded away from them by the police and by the institutions that protect us and pick up our garbage. Both of these movies then choose that milieu as a way to upgrade a consideration of genre types and are both pretty darn good entertainment. So I have to imagine to myself bumping into these if I were in Times Square, leaving some porno house, because I definitely would have been there with $20 in my wallet. Walk down the street, go see Shaft. Walk down the street, go see Klute. Walk down the street and go see something off Broadway, get a slice. But here's a point. I know that you and I have bumped into this variously in our conversations about movies, that there's something to be said and championed in the targeted movie made for a niche audience. That's done on the cheap, that's done well, that reaches that target market, and is hugely profitable. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And, of course, we're in a moment when that tends not to be the day.
But, in a way, that's kind of like the ideal.
If
everybody likes it, there's probably something not that great about it, because it can't be saying anything provocative or interesting.
I'm having a little brain dropping as I sit here, and it centers on this idea of getting a glimpse behind the scenes of prostitution and sex work, but those in a big city like New York. By the end of the decade, we're going to get Cruising.
Yes.
Which is another
Friedkin masterpiece.
And it's wonderful and dreadful and offensive and cool, all of these things, right? But it supplies a mainstream audience if they're willing to tolerate it with a vocabulary they probably weren't used to. So here's the brain dropping before I got the Cruising reference. I'm imagining this movie comes out in 71, right? And I've read the book American Psycho, which becomes a movie about 10 or 12 years after the book was published. And there's an important component to that of realizing that Bateman, Bret Easton Ellis's character, who is the American Psycho, he knows that pain and hurt and brutality turns him on, and he hires sex workers. Sometimes he hires them just to brutalize them, but he doesn't need to kill them, but he's going to brutalize them. And because he's rich, he's going to pay them famously. Because he knows they're going to be out of commission for a while where their bodies heal. And that seems to be part of what Klute's bad guy sort of is. And I'm thinking to a lot of people who aren't familiar with sadism, aren't familiar with that sort of paraphilia, it might seem just monstrous, and it is. I mean, I'm not somebody who gets excited by watching people beat each other.
Right.
I get excited, but it's not sexual excitement.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
I like a fight scene, I like a boxing match, I like those things, but it's not that it makes me feel aroused in that way. If this movie were flipped around and turned into the point of view of the bad guy, you get American Psycho.
Yeah.
Who's protected from all of the outcomes and problems of his terrible behavior because he's stupid wealthy.
The richer you are, the less laws apply to you, at least practically.
In the end, then, I think what the 70s would begin to do to American pop cultural systems is take the character, often the bad guy, the fulcrum that makes the whole thing shift, and make that person actually who we're going to think about. This is Blockbusters and Birdwalks, a conversation between Garrett Chaffin-Quiray and
Ed Rosa.
Boop boobity doo.